This is Tim.
Malele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo. How are you doing?
I'm good. And you?
Okay. Yeah. So we've been discussing what to include in this episode because we've got so much other stuff besides comics that we're talking about. But yeah, let's go to our comics here first. First of all, we've got a series called Read More Comix. That's comics with an X, which is done by three guys, Robb Mirsky, James Spencer, and David Craig. And full disclosure, Robb Mirsky is a friend of Coom, who, of course, has done some Deconstructing Comics episodes, including interviewing Mulele. Was that in Toronto?
Yeah,
that's right.
Last year.
Your TCAF adventure.
This adventure.
It reads kind of like it's an anthology, but it's the same three guys, doing multiple, sometimes very short stories in this one magazine. I mean, kind of a mixture of, like, some of them aren't even a page long, and then others can run several pages. And I really liked all of the art in this, no matter who was doing it. And the stories, sometimes they're funny and sometimes they're kind of unsettling or shocking, and sometimes they're both in the same story. I read the first two. I wanted to read number 3 and I just didn't have time. So how about you?
I actually quite liked it. Found it quite inspiring, actually. Yeah. And the way the comics kind of are one page, sometimes half a page, sometimes a little strip at the bottom or top. There's a lot of stuff where it just kind of ideas in these books are sometimes run just like half a page. And I'm not sure if they're switching artists at that point, but there are some where the story just is completely different halfway through the page, and you don't get confused by it. It is different enough, either in style or composition, that it's fine. You can run with it, and a lot of the ideas are really interesting, and I liked all of the stories that they told. Some of them were a little bizarre, but that's okay. I'm fine with some of those more abstract or conceptual stories. The one about the I guess he's a purple crow, hanging out with his blue spider friend and talking about you're not punk, you're just a boring guy. And so he goes to the restaurant and drinks that wine and burps in the waiter's face, and the waiter melts. That whole bit I liked quite a bit. And the ending was also kind of nice. There's a lot of just bizarre ideas. The brick stories that run through all three stories are like, I mean, the introduction to it is just, 3 bricks line up to go swimming, get set, go, splash, and they just drop to the bottom of the pool. Of course, they're just bricks. It's kind of absurdist comic stuff. It's really fun, really creative. And so I really, really liked it, and I felt that it was really worth the price of admission. I would say get this book if you can, in any form that you can. And I'm really looking forward to whatever they make in the future, just because all the ideas add up to much more than the some other parts.
Yeah, I'm just checking to see how this is available. They have a Tumblr. Looks like it hasn't been updated much lately, though. I'm not sure. I should check if this is on Comixology or not. I don't know. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Whatever I can find a link to for this, I will. I always link to the comic if I can.
Yeah. Oh, I have to say, one of the comics that kind of hit me the hardest was this just 6-panel comic in the first issue where the guy's a comic book artist drawing at the table, and he kind of grows a beard, then he dies at his table, then his ghost comes out, I'm free. And then he says, gosh, I just can't leave these pages unfinished. And then the ghost starts drawing. Yeah, some days I feel like that. But well done.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a great comic.
Mm-hmm.
And
I do not see it on Comixology, but I'll link to that Tumblr and whatever else I find. But
yeah, and just to the artists who create the book, when I steal your ideas and make my own Read More Comics with an S instead of an X, please understand it's an homage to your greatness. So
yeah, the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was saying that some of them were both funny and disturbing. Like the first issue story about the sewer mutant, Todd. And the first part of that story, when he goes out and meets the teenagers, and he's trying to prove that he is scary. He's afraid people are going to be bored by him. And he ends up making friends with the teens, but then in the course of things, he ends up killing somebody, and then they're all done with him. So it's kind of like, oh boy, that took a bad turn, but
it's sudden bad turn. It's all within the last page.
Yeah. I wasn't quite sure what the intended point of it was, but it was like, well, even if I didn't understand it, I still liked it. Which I felt about several of them, but
yeah.
There's a one panel with like Care Bears playing, and then there's some others who are like, I don't know what you'd call them, non-Care Bears. One of them has a gun on his stomach, and another one has a bottle of booze and so forth. And I think one's smoking a joint, and the picture on his stomach is a joint. So, and one of them says, "Let's introduce ourselves." But that's all we get. And then we got the story of a wiener dog mating with a hot dog.
Yeah, so the ridiculous concepts are ridiculous but short, and the longer concepts are interesting. They go somewhere, they have something to say.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I like about it. Nothing overstays its welcome.
Yeah.
But it all seems to be going somewhere. And I think it goes beyond anthology in that there are just 3 artists that are constantly rotating through the book, different stories. Issue 1 and issue 2 seem to be about 30 pages apiece, but issue 3 is 40 pages. The price is also a little bit more, at least the cover price. But yeah, again, worth it. Definitely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the books that we like, it's always hard to find very much to say about them. Or we kind of finish up quicker because there's nothing to complain about.
Yeah. The art styles vary from story to story, and I've got nothing to say critically about the art styles.
Yeah.
Or about the writing styles. They vary. They seem to know what they're doing. And when it's rough, it's decidedly rough. And when it's smooth, it's decidedly smooth.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Okay, our second comic is called Antfarm. This was sent in by Alberto Melendez, who wrote quite a lengthy email about the whole development of this comic, which is a little too long to try to read into the podcast. But basically, the story was the idea of his brother, Tony, who was originally drawing the comic and Alberto was writing it. I'm not quite sure how long ago this started, but life kind of got in the way. Alberto got married and was having a baby, and then Tony got sick and actually, unfortunately, passed away last December. But Alberto wants to keep the comic going.
Mm-hmm.
So he sent us this first issue of it. I'm not sure how he intends to publish this, but I don't know if he's just like self-publishing it or putting it online somewhere. So the story of Antfarm issue 1 is it shows it's ants, or at least it's sort of human-shaped ants with antennae, and they're soldiers. They've got armor and kind of sci-fi guns, and it's kind of on the order of not exactly Star Wars, but something not too far away from that. And some of the soldiers get kidnapped by a slaver, and they're trying to get them back. I don't know. I really struggled with this, I'm sorry to say. And there were several reasons for that. So my first thought was that I was expecting a comedy. And it took itself really seriously. I mean, there were a few little bits where the kind of thing you would expect, where sort of insect-related kind of almost gags, not exactly gags, but they're trying to say, like, I can't find a good example right now, but maybe something that people would normally say is altered a little bit for the ant world.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, it took itself really seriously. It kind of made me wonder, why are they ants?
Mm-hmm.
So, I thought of other stories with, like, anthropomorphized creatures. Something like Art Spiegelman's Mouse. The characters are cats and mice and dogs for a specific purpose. And so it works there. Black Sad, I mean, the art is beautiful, so I kind of ignore my questions about why are they animals, I guess. With this, I mean, the art is nice in this, but not only are they very kind of human-shaped and human-like ants, but also their surroundings don't really tell me that they're ant-sized. If you think of A Bug's Life, you're always conscious of the size of the characters in relation to things that we are familiar with, like grass and trees. But, in this, the trees appear to be the same size that we would see them. So it seems like these ants are maybe human-sized, or this is some completely different world, some other planet. I'm not sure. So, yeah, I kept wondering why they needed to be ants. But the other thing was that just as a story, we're kind of dropped into this battle situation, and I didn't know what the stakes were, and I didn't really know who the characters were, and the story didn't give me much information about either of those things. It felt like I felt like I was coming in the middle of the story, because a lot of things that I might wonder about were not explained. So it made the story feel kind of generic. And I didn't really have a reason to care about the characters or what they were doing, and so it was difficult to keep concentrating on reading the story, which was, it's only a 32-page PDF, but I just had trouble. It didn't keep my interest, I should say. So what did you think?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the nose, where it does take itself a little bit too seriously, and so there is actually a kind of feeling like there's some missed opportunity here. If you consider what ants are in a colony and how they operate, everything is for the queen. You, as an American, I would poke so much fun at the British for that. For Queen and Country. Just all up and down the comic. But the characters do exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're treated very much like humans would look at worker ants.
He's not taking advantage of the fact that they're ants.
Well, he's not imbuing them with some kind of characteristics. How can I say? When we look at ants, this ant, that ant, we can't tell the difference. We don't care. And there seems to be a little bit of that going on in the comic. Story-wise, there's no... as far as I can tell, there are no arcs that are being pushed through for any of these ants. They're there, they're doing a job because that's what they got to do, and it seems to be like a rescue mission. But beyond that, it doesn't really, like you said, the stakes are unclear. And it's not that a rescue mission is a pointless thing or a worthless thing, but there's usually some other stakes there.
Yeah, and we know the characters who got kidnapped in a well-written story, but I don't know anything about the people who got kidnapped, or the ants who got kidnapped.
Well, if you look at it story structure-wise, they usually split it into two different parts. There's the personal side, and then there's also the larger stakes, which are a little more abstract. Take, for example, Indiana Jones and the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you have Indy chasing the Ark and trying to defeat Belloc, who is his arch rival. And he's also trying to save Miriam because that's his girl. And so if he gets the Ark, he saves the world possibly from the Nazis. If he defeats Belloc, he gets his girl back, possibly. So it's kind of a mixture of those two. And this seems to have only the abstract stakes one, but even those stakes aren't quite clear because, like, we have to get those our people back because they're our people.
Yeah.
But there's nothing beyond that to give me a personal feeling of, oh shit, they captured the queen, or the plan of the slavers is to take these couple of people and do something that has a bigger effect on the rest of the hive. And so it seems to kind of lose its own momentum almost instantly because none of that is set up. And the Flash, all of the story is told in flashback. And if we look at the first page, the first word, or first two words, present time. And I mistook that meaning modern day now. But come to a few pages later, when...
oh, yeah, I missed that. Many hours earlier at the Great Red Ant Mound on page 5.
And so now that first sentence makes sense, a little more sense, but I'm kind of wondering why the story was told this way. If we're dealing with a, what would you call it, a prophecy storyline, it's okay to make a prophecy. And if you take some sort of mathematical characteristic of ants, maybe they have worked out the math of life itself and know that at a certain point something is coming and this is just the way it is. And maybe there becomes an existential question there. If you know what the future is, because it's all circular and the math is worked out, what's the point of doing anything? And I don't know, I kind of feel like it adds a bit. And if you follow the one person or one ant who is questioning this whole thing, then the stakes are laid upon him or her. And you have a focus for the story to rest on. And suddenly the stakes are about this this question, the answer bearing out through this being's actions or inactions. And, well, the stakes you still have to kind of set up, but still, at least you've got a question there. And so this seems to kind of miss a lot of opportunities through its lack of analysis of its own being. It seems very unaware of itself.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that about the flashback. Yeah, later on, well, it's page 21 of the story, but page 23 of the PDF, that scene, it says it takes place weeks earlier. So that takes place before anything else. Mm-hmm. And then a few pages later, we're back with the soldiers, and it's present time now. But yeah. I didn't feel like the scenes had anything to do with each other, and so the fact that these are taking place at different times almost didn't seem relevant.
Yeah, well, it comes to a point of, don't worry, it'll all be answered in the next issue or the next coming issues. But if you're charging $5 a comic, then it becomes a point of, well, how much is this need to know worth to me? Mm-hmm. And if it's not worth $5, then you've lost after the first issue.
Yeah.
And so you have to be clear in your setup, and any promises you make have to be explicit. And you have to also kind of prove that it's worth the wait, like something that's going to come, because I've shown you something really awesome and excellent in this first issue.
Yeah, including making the characters a little more interesting. I mean, I can't really tell you anything about the characters. They're a lot of humanoid ants who just kind of go through military stuff, and I didn't really identify with any of them.
Well, I feel that the lack of a story arc is in any story, not just this one, but in any story, there's no reason for it not to be there. You can do that. One panel at the beginning of the comic, you can set it up in one sentence. You can set it up in a look between characters. What is the creature going for, or the person? What's the character going for? Second panel, midway through the comic, what have they realized about what they're trying to achieve? And then last panel at the end of the book, what did they actually get in regards to their efforts? And you can make that as complicated as you want, or you can leave it that simple. And I don't know, I'm sure there are people out there, it's like, no, I can do it in one panel. And fine, if you can, then especially there's no reason for you not to. Because a story arc gives us a sense of, I want to see this person win. Mm-hmm. Rather than just watching two people fight. It's kind of like not knowing who to root for. Mm. And you know who to root for because you spend the most time with that person, and you know their stakes on a personal level. That's why you root for them. Mm-hmm. And that's why the bad guy usually doesn't get that much screen time. Talk about Darth Vader in Star Wars got, something like 20 minutes in total? Mm-hmm. And so we're not about him. We're about Luke Skywalker. And, the other characters get, some other percentage of screen time, but Luke gets the most. Mm-hmm. Because he's the one who's going to turn everything in such a way that the good guys win. So in that way, we need something like that here. And so for each of these characters that are the protagonists, if you were to add 3 panels per comic showing something personal about them, where they're trying to go from here.
Mm-hmm. Or that they hate snakes or something like that. If you're talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark.
So something personal. Personal. The whole thing about him hating snakes was that he then had to overcome that shit just to get the Ark, and then overcome it again in the same scene just to survive. And it ratchets up the tension to a fever pitch. It doesn't come back after he gets out of the Well of Souls in the movie, but the Well of Souls itself is a great centerpiece because it's been established that he hates snakes. Now he's going to deal with all the snakes in the world.
Yeah, it makes it much more personal and something, and a little bit humorous, and something that we, might identify with if we also maybe don't like snakes.
Exactly. That was an amazing bit. It doesn't work quite as well in the second one where they do bugs, or the third one where they do rats, because they're not set up well. He's not really afraid of those anyway, and I really don't care if his companion hates insects in the second one. I didn't like her anyway. No one did. But anyway, and then Spielberg married her. But what's her name? Kate Capshaw?
That might be right.
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, my point is, it is not simple writing to set up these arcs, but it's not a lot of real estate to pull them off. So work it up in the writing, put it into the script, lay it down in the comic. You don't need to have a 32-page personal story to explore this person's wants and needs for the next issue. That's kind of gratuitous. See that kind of shit on The Walking Dead, but yeah. So I would say those are the places that this could really benefit. And as far as this comic goes, the comic itself is fine. The fact that they're having this battle is also fine. Some of the reasons why have to be a little bit more explained, and some of the wants and needs of the characters individually have to be explored. And if you do those things, then yeah, the comic is fine. The artwork is good. The writing is fine. Just a couple of structural points.
Yeah, I was just thinking, what about these people? I mean, they are soldiers, and maybe all Answer soldiers. I don't know, but they must have. If you would expect that they would have families, and maybe they're doing this for their family member or something, or make it a little more personal that way. Like, oh, I need to finish this up and get back to take care of my daughter or something.
Yeah, well, the ads seem to have gender cues, for lack of a better phrase, which imply breastfeeding. So I don't know. How far are you going to make them human? Does it go that far, or are we just looking at actual ants with human shapes?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
We heard from Victor Edison. I keep forgetting to read this on the podcast. I finally remembered this time. We talked about his comic had to do with Japanese history or the history of his town. I didn't go back and look up the title of it, but the first issue was about kind of Japanese creation myth. And he says, "Thank you for taking the time to review my latest comic. I didn't want to bog the story down with explanations of various minor characters, the demons Izanami sent after Izanagi, for example." Yeah, I commented that we didn't know anything about them. However, I found Mulele's comments about the reduction of the story being a hindrance to the enjoyment of the story interesting. Yeah, you thought it needed to breathe a little more.
Yeah.
And your summary that the author or artist should be reflected in the work also made me think. I think it is important when writing to reduce a story to its essential elements, but this might just be an excuse to cover up my own lack of confidence as a writer. If I'm not bringing anything new to the story, what's the point? This was a good criticism that I'll be thinking about a lot as I move forward. And thanks for your English major criticism. Father is probably a much better translation of umaseo than bear, and it is definitely better than B-A-R-E, bear. Sweat emoticon. I need to get a proofreader, ... So, yeah, well, thanks for your response.
By the way, I do have one extra little comment about him as a writer. Every story that's told by every person has two basic stories in it. There's the story that is being told, and then there's the story of the writer kind of learning as they go. It depends on how hard they pushed in that story. Like if they really went out and tried to discover something new and actually made some sort of discovery about themselves or about writing or about their characters. Sometimes you can see it. You can see it much more in the independent stuff than you can in the majors for film or for comics or anything. And one of the reasons why I like indie comics so much more than, or not just indie comics, but indie anything, indie music, indie film, so much more than the mainstream stuff, is because the mainstream stuff, everything is vetted, and it's vetted, it's tried and true. There are no experiments there, and anything that would be considered a risk or possibly distasteful is removed. Kind of the dogs are never killed. Dogs and children are never killed in movies. They're starting to kind of walk away from the children thing. Like, it's like, okay, this film is not pulling any punches. They just killed that kid. But dogs still generally will survive. And that's a nasty commentary on American society. But anyway, so in the indie stuff, when you see the writer make a discovery, and it comes across in the work, either in the enthusiasm that suddenly picks up in the way the story is told, or how it's drawn, or how it's written, or it comes across in a kind of switch of some aspect of the overall content. One example, I believe the author's name is Chester Brown, who did
Clumsy and a lot of other stuff.
No, they're not Chester Brown. Sorry.
I'm getting mixed up with Jeffrey Brown. Yeah, I'm thinking of Jeffrey Brown. Yeah, I always get them confused. Chester Brown did the
Ed the Happy Clown.
Ed the Happy Clown. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Ed the Happy Clown, suddenly in the middle of the story, the female protagonist, I forget her name, gets a redesign. Just out of the blue. She goes from kind of like outline of hair, which we assumed was blonde, to suddenly fully realized, richly detailed black hair. And it's such a shock because, like, end of one issue, beginning of the next issue, it's just different. And I commented about it, and you read something where he said, yeah, I just didn't like the way the character looked, so I redesigned her. And that was it. That was it. And but he realized that it needed to be something more. He made that choice that it's better to have this jarring change in the story than to, I'll do better next time kind of thing. It's like, no, I'm redefining this character right here, right now. Boom. And he does it. And it's jarring for the reader, but I'm fine. The story itself is actually quite interesting. And yeah, I mean, I'm not that delicate, but still seeing that kind of discovery by the artist / writer is sometimes fun, sometimes a little bizarre. You don't know what to think, why, and maybe you'll never find out. But for me, it's always been much more interesting. So to Victor Edison, explore those things, and do not consider the quality of your writing. Consider the quality of your exploration of your story to your own satisfaction. That's the most important thing, because people will like or dislike your story regardless of what you write. You cannot write for everyone, and you're not. You're writing for yourself first and foremost. So be true to who you are, and everybody else can follow or they can fuck off. And it'll be much more satisfying there.
All right, so I wanted to talk about something I thought would be interesting for people wanting to get work writing comics. Marvel recently put out a one-shot called Sensational Spider-Man Self-Improvement. It concerns the black costume that Spidey wore in the 80s. And it turns out the idea of Spidey having a black costume was originally proposed by a fan named Randy Schuler, who submitted a script back in 1982. And in this book, it starts out with a comic done by some, I don't remember who now, but some professionals, that's loosely based on the script that he submitted. I think it's improved a lot. But there is a story that follows that outline. And the book also contains another comic story that's unrelated to the genesis of the black costume. But in between the two stories, there are 4 pages of text, which are Schuler's original pitch, and then a second draft that includes some comments that editor Tom DeFalco wrote on the pitch, and someone has transcribed it all, what Schuler wrote, and then with DeFalco's comments in red. And unfortunately, there were places where the transcriber couldn't read DeFalco's handwriting. I guess it got kind of smudged in the intervening years. But still, I thought the parts that were legible were interesting. To see like what kinds of mistakes new writers might make. And so the basic idea of his story is that Reed Richards develops the black costume for Spidey out of unstable molecules, rather than it being a symbiote, as actually ended up happening in the comics. And the way that his story started was with the Fantastic Four just contacting Spidey out of the blue. Hey, we've got a black costume for you. And without any real kind of reason for it or anything. And DeFalco writes, story should start with Spidey in an action sequence so that we can establish his old costume and old web shooters.
Yeah.
Then Schuler writes, Reed has designed a new costume for him. And DeFalco asks, why? And
because it's an eyesore and Reed Richards thinks it's not stylish.
but a lot of DeFalco's notes have to do with either establishing the status quo before you change it, or not getting so caught up in what's being said or thought by the characters that you forget what's supposed to be happening in the art. He makes that mistake a number of times too. So, and those would be easy traps to fall into. In fact, I was remembering way back centuries ago at this point when I was doing Spider Hag, I would, plot and script ahead of time, and then when I was actually doing the art, I got to thinking about, what's happening here. And, once I decided what the action was, then it would start to cause changes in the script, because what was happening on, in the art would start to influence where the story should go. Because, I didn't think about that when I was scripting it. So I could identify with Schuler's error there. So I shared this with Mulele too. Did you have any thoughts on it?
It was kind of curious. And for me, I was familiar with the Black Costume reading the first Secret Wars comic. When it originally came out, I collected that shit and enjoyed it. Although kind of looking back, the artwork was maybe drawn just a little too quickly for my liking. Everybody was always in a kind of legs akimbo kind of pose. But Spider-Man getting a new costume, and then in the Spider-Man comic, because it's like takes place 1 year later, they just suddenly, boom, everybody's a year ahead. Now read Secret Wars for the next 12 months to find out what actually happened, because we're going to refer to this from here on in every comic that you like. And it was, I think, kind of the beginning of the Marvel-wide event series. And so it was kind of curious at that point. But kind of after a while, and unrelated to Secret Wars or any of that stuff, I kind of fell off those comics. And so what is the status of the Black Costume now? I mean, is it just considered the start point of Venom, or?
Basically. Venom still exists, but as I understand it, and I haven't followed Venom that closely, but I think the Black Costume became Venom and still exists as Venom.
But beyond that, I don't know. I kind of wondered why so much is being given to this fan script. Why is it important?
I think it's just kind of a curiosity that, I haven't seen the others, but I guess they've been doing a series of these where they, of what exactly, I'm not sure, but maybe there were other submissions that led to something actually happening in comics and they're representing them. I haven't seen any of the others. I'm not quite sure what the common thread is.
Interesting. Well, it just seemed to me that, okay, here's a fan who turned in a script. That's all fine and good. The script obviously has some problems. This person is not a professional writer, let alone comic writer. And but still, they found some kernel of something that they liked, so they decided to run with it. I don't know. It seemed to me that it's kind of interesting from the point of kind of looking at how the system works, but that level of geekery is beyond me. So I kind of look at this and go like, okay, yeah, I can see that. And who was it? Tom DeFalco's?
He was editing.
Yeah. So his all of his statements, you can kind of see him getting more and more impatient with the script as he went on. And I think some of those where it says, like, in parentheses, intelligible, they were kind of
unintelligible or illegible or something.
Illegible, yeah. I think some of those were bad words that they decided not to repost. There are just a couple of times where, fucking or something would just like fit so perfectly right there. And
yeah, or else he was just so exercised at that point that his handwriting was getting scribbly. I don't know.
Perhaps. I don't want to besmirch his reputation if he is a person who does not swear. I do not know Tom DeFalco personally, but his comments were kind of curious. But the value of this piece is a little bit beyond me. But to be honest, the value of Marvel Comics is a little bit beyond me. Even though I enjoy the films quite a bit, the comics I've not enjoyed in years.
I think, it's a curiosity if you remember the black costume and you kind of want to know the secret origin of the idea, which was why I bought it. But then I thought that this, seeing the original pitch and DeFalco's comments on it was also interesting in terms of, trying to write comics and get them published.
Well, I mean, it does kind of come down the line of any major story that went through its development stages, like looking at the development breakdown of any of the Star Wars films, and how Darth Maul was originally a woman, or how Luke Skywalker was originally Luke Starkiller. It was kind of a combination of Han Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Luke Skywalker. And just seeing some of the concept art for that stuff, you kind of look at it and go, huh. But then you just walk away because there's nothing else to do with it. This is kind of on that level. Yeah.
In a moment, Mulele and I will be discussing the latest news and rumors regarding Spider-Man's apparent split from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Mulele and I, of course, are reviewing the MCU movies one by one in Tim Catches Up with the MCU, a special podcast only for our supporters at $4 and up at patreon.com/deconcomics. Last Saturday, we released our discussion of Avengers: Age of Ultron, and we hope you'll pledge at least $4 a month and join the fun. And all of our patrons can listen to outtakes from this very episode of Critiquing Comics. Patrons can get an RSS feed for their podcast app to easily access all the podcasts available at their level of support. We thank everyone who has pledged their support at patreon.com/deconcomics. Now back to the show.
The stuff with the Sony Spider-Man thing, I have not heard too much about this, but I did see that during D23, they brought out Tom Holland, the actor who plays Spider-Man, and Kevin Feige was also there, and they said, well, we tried, but it didn't work out. Sorry, guys. It wasn't going to last forever, but we knew this was going to be a short-lived thing, but we got to make the movies that we wanted to make, and I'm so happy for that. That was basically what Kevin Feige said in either the onstage presentation or in the background thing. I don't remember which, but in a background interview. But basically, they said they tried, but didn't work out. And that was the end of D23. And people were kind of pissed. And then comes out a few days later that, nope, there's still a possibility. You never know. And then it was, they had struck a deal.
Okay, so it was all 3D chess.
Yeah, they were still playing it up, and people were saying that the D23 expo was actually kind of lackluster in the film section. Some people are speculating that there's an extra year's worth of material that they're not announcing because of this whole Spider-Man kerfuffle. I don't know if any of that is true, but basically it comes to Spider-Man is going to play, or was seemingly being set up to play a bigger and bigger role in the MCU, starting in Phase 4.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the Far From Home film, the last film that came out, very clearly that. And so I think a lot of people were looking at that as, okay, well, if Spider-Man is not in the MCU, what the hell are they going to do? But when they came out and said, oh, we tried and that's it, and we'll never mention it again, and blah, 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 we'll move on. It's like, oh, okay, really? But I think it was just to show Sony that they were willing to go there. It's, once again, a piece of negotiation. And so a few days later, it was worked out. And I think what they worked out was a 30-70 split. I'm not sure of the details there.
I'm not finding anything. That's odd. Just looking online. Because I'm finding very recent articles that are talking about it breaking up.
Yeah. There was a lot of, they broke up, that's it, they broke up. And then I heard via podcast, now they worked it out.
Okay.
I think like 2 or 3 sources, now they worked it out. But I haven't seen anything online like that, just in podcast form. It's weird.
What podcast was that?
Let's see. A podcast you would not have heard of called Is the Mic Still On?
Okay.
By Dead End Hip Hop. They usually talk hip hop stuff, and I don't know how much of a hip hop fan you are, but their most recent episode of Is the Mic Still On is 3 hours long. They go a lot, and each member of the group will bring a topic, and one of them brought up Spider-Man, and then they kind of talked about how, okay, it's been worked out. And that's where I heard it, I think either for the first time or second time, I can't remember which. In the other podcast, I can't quite remember where I heard it, but basically, that's what I heard, that they worked it out.
Okay.
I was feeling for a while, it's like, oh, I talk all that shit about, they'll work it out, and then D23 happens, it's like, oh, they didn't work it out. Well, fuck. I guess I'm wrong. I feel like an idiot because we put that podcast out already. And it's like, okay, well, let me wait a little bit and see if there's anything else. And then this comes like, oh, vindicated. I was right. And now everybody should just pay attention to me. But, you saying I can't find anything on the internet about this makes me feel nervous again. But basically, from what I've heard, they've worked it out. If I'm wrong, I guess I'm wrong. If they haven't worked it out, that throws a bit of a monkey wrench. But see, the thing of it is, I think it's really disadvantageous for Sony, and it's also very dangerous for them. Mm-hmm. The producer who made Into the Spider-Verse is actually Amy Pascal, who would not be involved with the new Spider-Man films that would be produced by Sony. At least I don't think so. Mm. I'm not exactly sure what her deal is, but I think her deal kind of puts her somewhere in the vicinity of Spider-Man. But anyway, chances are they're going to have a bad producer and a bad writer, director, whatever you want to, person who oversees the projects. Of course, this is from Midnight's Edge. They were talking about what a shit show it is over there. But they also said, nah, the deal is fucked. It's over. Spider-Man's gone. And they've kind of left it there. So they're working on the premise that Spider-Man is done with the MCU. And that the character and all the movies that they produce will be on the level of junk. But whether or not they make money, it just depends on the whims of the people. Like Into the Spider-Verse, best Spider-Man movie ever, did not was not a big hit, but it was critically loved. Venom, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. It was bashed by critics and loved by the audience, who gave it lots of money, and loved by general people. But we'll see what happens. My hope is that he stays in the MCU. My feeling is that it's already done. Maybe people are just tired of writing about this and can't keep up with the shit, and we'll hear about some sort of final deal at the end. But that's what I've heard, the latest.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, I should say the Is the Mic Still On podcast is really fun. But it is basically pop culture from a Black perspective, from a group of people in Atlanta. And they are really interesting people. I like them very much. But that podcast, if you're just listening for that little bit of Spider-Man news, it's, I think, about an hour into the podcast, and it's only about 10 minutes. So if you want to listen to it, go ahead, but just you'll have to wade through a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you would like us to critique your comic, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and we'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it here on the show. And we keep forgetting to give our social media. I've been doing it in the voiceover at the end, but I am at Decon Comics on Twitter.
Oh, and I'm at Mulele Redux on Twitter and on Instagram. Used to have a Facebook, but I kind of dipped out. So if you want to find me, any of my new stuff, anything that I'm doing now, and usually it's just retweets of other people's shit, or me throwing up some artwork every once in a while. I don't really have a lot to say, but if you at me, maybe a conversation will develop. So at me.
Yeah. On mine, I mean, I'm not that active on Twitter, but lately I've been, of course, any new thing that comes out, I'll tweet about it, including because of our improvement on our Patreon page. I've been re-releasing old episodes that disappeared back in 2008, when I changed from the hard-coded website to the blog-style site. And so because we reached a certain goal, I've been putting some of those episodes back, or they're making them available again for the first time in a decade. And so I've been announcing those on Twitter and Facebook also, on our Deconstructing Comics page on Facebook. So, and then the Bowling Green State University account, that was where I went for the Batman conference in April. I'll converse with them somewhat on Twitter, or they'll throw out all these pop culture things, and especially Batman. If Batman 66 comes up, then they at me.
Nice.
And sometimes some of the other Bat accounts, like the Batcave podcast, or like a question about something, like would you consider the Siren a mall or not? No, I said no, of course not. So that's caused me to be a little bit more active than I had been. So okay, so until next time, this is Tim.
And Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics. On August 31st, WeGotThisCovered.com reported that Sony and Marvel would be meeting again this week to discuss the Spider-Man situation. Mulele and I will continue to keep an eye on this situation. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Emmett is joined by his friend Bobsy to discuss the end of the Image series, The Walking Dead. See you then.